Let's get you all to the ground in Caracas now with independent journalist Ana Vanessa Herrero, and also with us former U.S. ambassador to Venezuela, MS Now international affairs analyst James Story, and former federal prosecutor Joseph Moreno. Anna, you were there when the bombs dropped. What's the scene and the feeling among the people of Venezuela today as Maduro is taken to court?
Well, days after it happened, people keep telling me the same story. They keep telling their story of where they were when it happened. And believe it or not, the conversation is still not revolving around what's next for Venezuela. People are in shock, in constant shock. I mean, image after image that we are getting, gets Venezuelans together in the same mood. Like they don't believe what just happened, and it is unbelievable. When I was watching the pictures and the images right there that we're seeing on the screen, for Venezuelans, this is a historic moment for every Venezuelan, even for those who are supported Maduro and for those who oppose Maduro. I mean, people right now are trying to understand how in just hours. It went from Maduro dancing and celebrating New Year, saying that Venezuela was safe and the United States could not touch Venezuela, to this.
Yeah, and now we're seeing these protests here in the U.S., as we noted, and you mentioned at the top of your reporting. What about there? Have there been protests or demonstrations or any kind of public unrest?
Yeah, some demonstrations over the weekend. People, supporters of Maduro, called by members of the government who were left here in Venezuela. And they are calling, they're urging the United States and the Trump administration to bring Maduro back. Those are the people that we could see taking to the streets, hundreds of them taking to the streets over the weekend. But still, there's a huge void that everyone is wondering, what about those on the ground celebrating what we're looking at now? Well, they exist. It is happening, but it's not happening outside because still people are afraid that if they show some kind of hope or joy or celebration, they could face jail time or they could face even death. So Venezuelans are very accustomed to to being very careful on what and how they show whatever it is that they're feeling in a moment of crisis.
Ambassador, there's so much to dissect and really dig into when it comes to the consequences of this operation. Are Americans safer today with Maduro in custody and in court? Is it harder to traffic drugs now than it was 3 days ago?
Well, I certainly think that the region, Venezuelans themselves, and the United States are all safer with Maduro in custody. He was a person facing crimes against humanity in the International Criminal Court, indicted for narcotics trafficking, and certainly created a situation in Venezuela that resulted in 25% of the population fleeing. It was a necessary but insufficient act, in my opinion. There's some other actors on the ground who can be spoilers, in particular Diosdado Cabello and Vladimir Padrino Lopez. So to the extent that we want to work now, evidently, with Delcy Rodriguez, she's going to have her hands full dealing with Diosdado Cabello, who frankly runs the internal security services. He's responsible for 900 plus political prisoners, including wrongfully detained Americans. So as your reporter just mentioned, folks don't want to go out on the streets because they're scared that he'll send the colectivos out. These are a semi-official motorcycle gang to intimidate and potentially kill people who would be celebrating Maduro's capture.
A big question still remains, Joseph, and that is, did the U.S. even have legal authority for this operation? How do you see it?
Anna, I hate to give you a lawyer's answer, but I'm going to give you one. It depends on who you talk to. I mean, we're very much in a gray area here. And we've heard several different justifications from the administration about why they believe this has a legal basis. For months, we heard references to terrorism, right? And narco-terrorism, which doesn't really have a legal meaning. But I think the desire there was to say this is subject to the authority granted by Congress to protect the country against terrorists, right? Which was enacted basically after the 9/11 attacks. Now we've heard it's more of a law enforcement argument that this actually was a drug prosecution extraction only backed by the military. Now, that's harder to digest when you hear the president now say we're going to run the country. So I think it really depends on how much latitude you want to give the president in terms of these arguments. It also raises a great opportunity, like, a lot of these issues that have gone back to Panama, to Libya, to Somalia. I mean, maybe they really need to get worked out so that in the future we understand what exactly the authority the White House has and how much authority Congress has to be notified and then be part of the process going forward.
Right. Congress was not notified. They were not brought into the conversation to grant any kind of authority when it came to this operation. But Joseph, if you just look at the indictment and the specific charges against Maduro and the others who were captured, narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, also conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. How strong is the legal case against Maduro?
It's probably very strong. I mean, we keep hearing about charges that were made in 2020, and then there's a superseding indictment as of 2025. Fact is, this case was opened in 2011. They've been working on this for a decade and a half. So there's probably a pretty substantial amount of evidence, or they wouldn't have brought these charges. The first one, narco-terrorism, is a little creative because it references a terrorist group that is funded by narcotics trafficking. That one I could see some challenges to. But as far as the cocaine importation and the weapons charges, those are pretty standard charges you bring against a major drug kingpin. So I think once Maduro gets past all of the jurisdictional challenges and the fact that he's going to argue he was a foreign head of state and should get immunity, once the courts get past all that, this is a typical defense that he's going to have to mount against a U.S. attorney's office that is very experienced in bringing cases like this.
Ambassador, as a former ambassador to Venezuela, what do you make of the case against Maduro and what we're seeing right now happening, play out as the world is reacting to his capture?
Well, I'd say that exactly right from our FBI colleague here, former FBI colleague. This has been a long time in the making. And I'd point out that starting in 2015 under President Obama, they've identified, each administration has identified Venezuela as posing a threat to the United States. Venezuela, under this dictatorship, has been a destabilizing force in the region. And again, I go back to 9 million Venezuelans who have fled, hundreds and hundreds of political prisoners and what have you, International Criminal Court case, the indictment for narcotics trafficking, all of these issues. Some of the protesters that are complaining about, frankly, the operation to take out Maduro, weren't out there protesting when Maduro stole an election last year. So there's a democracy angle here. There's a human rights angle. There's a regional stability piece to this. All of these come together. Now, leaving Diosdado Cabello and Vladimir Pergino Lopez, I think, are going to end up being difficult things to deal with at some point in time. And also not bringing in, like we did in Panama, the rightful leader of the country. This is Edmundo Gonzalez, who won the last election, and having at least some of the members of the Democratic opposition be part of this transitional government, I think ultimately are going to make this period of time a little more complex.
Quickly, if you will, is it a mistake not to be trying to work with the opposition leaders you just spoke of?
I think Maria Corina Machado should return to Venezuela. I think that we should be looking at, again, in the case of Panama, when Manuel Noriega was ousted, we brought back in the rightfully elected person who had been elected in the election that had been stolen by Noriega. I think that Edmundo Gonzalez has a role here. He did win over 70% of the vote in the country. I think there should be a broader set of actors in this interim government than just Delcy Rodriguez, who is a Maduro loyalist. If the idea here is that international oil companies are going to come in and start investing in Venezuela, the same exact regime exists today. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done to reinstitutionalize the country so that there would be that kind of support for business to go back there.
Former Ambassador James Story, Ana Vanessa Herrero, and Joseph Moreno, thank you all for that conversation.